Hi and welcome to the Geek Legion of Doom. This is a fantasy movie review and I'll be having a look at Tales of an Ancient Empire, also known as Sword and the Sorcerer Part 2. That's right, this is actually a sequel to the 1982 cult sword and sorcery film Sword and the Sorcerer. So that may surprise some people. Now, just if you haven't seen that film, because obviously it is a little bit old now, first of all, you don't really need to have seen that film to watch this one. So the Sword and Sorcerer film was one of those sort of films in the 80s that kind of came off the back of the sort of Conan the Barbarian's popularity, and we saw a rash of these sort of cheaper sword and sorcery films that, you know, and this one, to be fair, is one of the ones that it kind of fondly remembered, like for people like me. So this one obviously was made in 2010, so it's obviously a good long while since the original, and since it's not exactly a particularly well-known film, they are actually playing down the fact that this is actually a sequel. This obviously takes place a number of years after the original film finished, and it's basically the story of this sort of vampire sorceress woman who's kind of arisen from her grave and sort of takes revenge on the kind of the kingdoms that basically tried to defeat her once before. Who she's referring to is Talon, who is actually the hero of the first film, played by Lee Horsley. Basically what you've got here in this film is it's a very strange film because it's a really, really low budget arty genre film, is the best way I could describe it. What you actually have, as it turns out, is Talon has actually fathered a variety of different children in his adventures. Some being a princess, for example, who is the daughter of the queen that originally defeated the vampire sorceress, along with a group of other people, an assassin, basically a couple of like low-life cheaters and things like that. So we get the impression that this guy is an old-school player, and he's got all these different kids, and essentially what the story is all of these sort of basically half brothers and sisters sort of teaming up to try and defeat this evil sorcerer, and they're led by this kind of like this female princess who's basically the one that's going around finding all these different warriors, including Kevin Sorbo, who seems to be the only male member of the family other than Talon himself, who we never really actually see, and I'll come on to that in just a second. Now, the main issue you're going to have with this film is nothing really happens. Now, this actually seems like it's like a first act in what I would assume to be some sort of trilogy. Although as far as I know, this is the only one that ever came out. All this film is set up because not a lot actually happens. We see the sort of a vampire get resurrected and take over the kingdom, and ultimately all these sort of half brothers and sisters sort of team up, and then that's pretty much it. But there are some sort of the kind of, I guess, the main character, who is this sort of princess. She's having like these sort of visions of the future, and we see stuff that's been filmed, which I'm assuming meant that they have actually filmed at least part of a sequel to this film. But as far as I know, it's never seen. I believe it's meant to be called Red Moon, the next one, but I've had a look, and as far as I know, it's never come to any type of fruition. Anyway, so that means pretty much this film drags because it's obviously stretched out far more than it should have been, and it quite frankly is pretty boring because there's nothing really that happens in it apart from, as I say, what we would consider a first act of any sort of normal film. And because it's obviously a fairly low budget film, it really does sort of test you a little bit because it's so dragged out. The vampire sorceress has sort of got her own daughter, which I believe is also another one of the children side by Mr. Player himself. And she's kind of, I guess, the sort of the bad guy for this film. Basically, the children of Talon are basically trying to find him to sort of, I guess, rid the original vampire sorceress of the kingdom once again. And he sort of turns up, but we never actually see who he is. And we basically sort of see him in sort of shadow, well, in a sort of cloak thing at the end. And he sort of, if you've watched the original, he's got this sort of sword that fires out blades. And, you know, he's using that basically against these sort of vampires. So obviously this is what I mean. We know it's a sequel, but apart from that, there really isn't any sort of any real relevance to the original film itself. And also the tone of the film is very significantly different. This actually feels like it should be an episode of Xena or something along the lines of that. It's a very, very made-for-TV film. And obviously you've got Kevin Sorbo in there, and he pretty much acts all the same way in every single thing he's in. So I got to say, I was quite intrigued with this film. I think it's quite a good idea to have a kind of fantasy film with vampires being the kind of the bad guys. Because I thought, well, I don't really remember if I've seen like a sort of medieval fantasy film with vampires being the bad guys. I thought, well, that might be something a bit different. But unfortunately, it's such a boring film to watch because nothing really happens. All it is people going from one place to another, talking in really bad dialogue. And it's actually quite a chore to sit through this film, unfortunately. There's some very, very pretty women in here, and there's lots of boobs and things like that. What can I say? That's pretty much all there is to this film. There's nothing else really I can tell you about what this film is actually about, because it really is about nothing else. I was so sort of like, couldn't believe what I was watching. It just seemed such a waste. And Albert Pyle is a director, as you know. He's made countless sort of like B movies, some of which I'm actually quite a fan of. But he has this habit with this film of using a lot of like digital tricks, and at the beginning of this film there's lots of like video tricks that he's using, not CGI exactly, but just sort of video effects, and they look so crap. And the main sort of vampire villainess, they have like a reverb on her voice. I just couldn't understand anything she was saying because it was just her voice was so sort of electronically affected. I could barely understand a word she was saying, so I pretty much had to pick up what she was saying by the reactions of the other people. Not that the plot is particularly dense, so it wasn't too hard, I'm just saying. So I have to say I was very disappointed with this film. I actually quite liked the original Sword and the Sorcerer, so it was a bit of a shame that this one turned out to be a bit of a turd, but there you go. So I'm going to have to give this film a 2.5 out of 10. Maybe it was getting in print, but unfortunately it's not good in practice. So 2.5 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What do you think of it? Leave me a comment. I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye for now.